So it's been a little over a month since OpenAI released Sora to the public, and after mostly ignoring it over the holidays, I finally decided to give it a try. And wow, it took me about 10 minutes of messing around to realize that this is actually going to change everything about the film industry, and a whole lot faster than I first thought.
Sora, this is the highly anticipated
OpenAI CEO Sam
called Sora.
What makes Sora different from...
It's faster, he says it's smarter.
I mean, I knew what Sora was and what it did from watching YouTube videos about it when the first demos came out last year sometime, but after actually seeing firsthand what I could get it to do with almost no effort, I wanted to weigh in again to where things stand in 2025. Because now, more than ever, I'm convinced this stuff is going to completely change the landscape, not just for filmmakers, but creatives of all kinds. It's not an exaggeration, at least in my opinion anyways, to say that AI is going to make a ton of film jobs obsolete in the very near future. And whether you're already in the industry or maybe just thinking about making film a career, you need to be aware of this stuff too. So in this video, I'm going to break down the impacts I think AI is going to have after testing out Sora for myself, which jobs I think are going to disappear first, and then how you can hopefully future-proof yourself in a world after AI. So I made a video about AI in video production last year sometime after watching MKBHD's first video on Sora, and that was pretty freaky already. But knowing about something and actually trying it out for yourself are totally different experiences. But then last month, OpenAI opened Sora up to anyone with a ChatGPT subscription, so I was able to start messing around with it personally, and it absolutely blew my mind. Seriously, if you haven't tried it, you should, because it's wild what it can do. I mean, I'm not actually planning to incorporate it into my professional workflow right now, but I feel pretty strongly that anyone in a creative or visual field should at least spend an hour generating videos just to get a sense of what's coming. Because as MKBHD said so well, this is the worst this tech is ever going to be. And that means a lot of people should be very, very nervous. And I'm not trying to be a fearmonger here, but honestly, I just don't see how this isn't going to mean the end of a bunch of different jobs in the industry. At the same time, I'm also definitely not saying that this is the end of filmmaking or that the future of storytelling is going to be only AI generated or anything like that, but we all have to accept that massive changes are coming, and they're coming right now. So let's start by looking at Sora, because I think we can agree it's the AI tool most obviously related to people working in film and video production. And just in case you don't know anything about it, the way it works is by typing out a text-based description of the video you want, and then it processes for maybe 10 or 20 seconds and gives you two options to choose from. If you don't like it, you can either try again with a more specific prompt, or you can hit the remix button and it will keep the same bass clip but then tweak it based on what you say. You can then pick subtle, moderate, or strong remixes, and that tells Sora how much to change the original. Pretty straightforward. I decided to start with something simple and asked it to generate a drone shot of the Toronto skyline at sunset. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, but it did give me two options with the drone on either side of the CN Tower. And it looks amazing, to be honest, like totally usable as an establishing shot. Now, I'm not actually sure if it's really generating a perfect representation of Toronto or if it's just identifying key features like the tower and Lake Ontario and then filling in the rest with a bunch of fake buildings. But the wild part is that neither me or my girlfriend, who's lived in this city her entire life, neither of us could tell. We ended up watching it 3 or 4 times, and now I'm pretty sure it's making a bunch of stuff up, but honestly, we couldn't tell definitively one way or the other. And that's crazy. Now, for a doc or news broadcast or something where you need to depict absolute truth or you'll lose the trust of the audience, then maybe that's an issue. But for a ton of people out there, it won't matter, because really very few people will notice if it's not perfect. If we didn't know conclusively after really trying to pay attention, then 99% of viewers won't think twice about it. And again, this is the worst this will ever be, so just give it a few years and I'm sure it really will be generating the skyline exactly as it is. That got me interested enough to push a little further and try and make a 10-second car commercial for no other reason than it was the first thing that came to my mind. So I asked Sora to make me a follow shot of a Ford Bronco driving on a tree-lined highway to start, and again, it did just that. Now, if you look closely, there are some weird things going on in these clips, like the fact that it won't generate the Ford logo exactly. One seems to say Roro and the other one says E-Fordo or something like that, and it makes sense for copyright and liability reasons. But both of them do say Bronco, so that's kind of interesting. And really, either of these shots would probably work in an edit. If you look really closely, there seems to be some odd stuff going on with the trees, but your average viewer isn't going to think much about this when it's on screen for like 3 seconds. Then I went to the next shot, and for that I asked for a side profile of a man in his 50s with gray hair driving a black Ford Bronco along a tree-lined highway. He should look confident and in a good mood with warm sunlight shining on his face. just basically trying to imagine what a generic car commercial looks like in my mind. This is where I started to see some weird stuff, namely that Sora doesn't quite understand physics yet, because in the first clip the guy is driving backwards, which obviously wouldn't work. But the second clip nailed it. And honestly, after watching it about 15 times, the only thing I can spot is that he blinks in kind of a weird way. But other than that, this feels like exactly the kind of shot you'd see in an average car commercial. And one more time, this is the worst this will be. So let's just assume in a couple of years, this will be perfect. Then I went to shot 3, which was a standard cutaway shot of a tire close to the ground. Again, something we might see in a real ad. The first 2 attempts were super squirrely and insisted on doing a bunch of unnatural camera movement that I'd never use in an edit. But when I asked it to try again with more specific prompts, it got pretty close to what I wanted. Again, you can see some really weird stuff with physics happening, like in this one where the tire is spinning backwards. And it also looks like this other tire isn't touching the ground here, but with a bit more tweaking, I'm pretty sure I could have gotten this the way I wanted it. Because just to remind you, I made this in under 10 minutes, so just let that sink in for a sec. Then to close it out, I asked for a drone shot of the same car, and they were kind of weird to be honest. Like one was a little too slow moving, and the other had some strange fisheye effects like it was shot on a GoPro on max wide angle, but I didn't really try to dial it in anymore because I'd already seen enough. Then I strung out all 4 clips together using the built-in storyboard tool, and if I'd added a bit of text to the end, plus maybe a Ford logo or something, I think it would have been passable as an actual car ad on TikTok or as a reel, apart from the weird logo stuff. Like even with the strangeness of some clips, I honestly don't think a person scrolling on their morning commute would think that much about it. Now I'm playing this back inside Sora instead of as an exported clip because Sora won't export shots featuring people for now, which I guess is to protect themselves legally until the world figures out how to regulate all this stuff. But that doesn't really matter to me because I'm sure that's going to change before too long. Plus, I'd already seen enough because, like, again, this was under 10 minutes of work and just a couple of weeks after the public launch and we're already here. Like that kind of stopped me cold because now there's no denying that this stuff is going to change everything. Now let's project a little bit because if it's this good now, in a year it'll be twice as good, and in 5 years it'll be insane because it's learning exponentially fast. So any arguments about how it will never replace film jobs because of the quirks we see today are totally irrelevant in my opinion, because it's gonna get perfect a lot faster than we can imagine. So what does that mean for film jobs? Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to wipe a large number of them out, particularly on the low budget and technical side of the industry. Like if we start with commercials as an example, I think that anything that doesn't require dialogue, so like those product ads with the coffee hitting the mug in slow motion, or where all the sections of the burger fall together or whatever, that's all gone below a certain price point. Like why would a business pay a production house a ton of money for, I don't know, a shot of a cold beer crashing through a waterfall when they could probably generate it in an afternoon with a MacBook Pro? A lot of them wouldn't. Like the huge brands are going to keep paying for longer because it's what they know and they have the money for it. But once tools like this are dialed in and even integrated into editing software, I honestly think it's game over for a lot of people. Stock footage is also in serious trouble, if not on the verge of disappearing completely, unless it's a shot of something that actually happened in real life, like a ceremony or an event. Real estate? Also done before too long in my opinion, because I can easily imagine being able to feed stills of a property into a program like this and then the app being able to generate perfect gimbal moves through the living room or drone shots of the property from above. Like I don't see any reason the agent won't be able to just take photos on their phone, tell Sora to analyze and brighten everything up, and then export something just as good as an operator with a mirrorless camera on a Ronin. Ditto for generic drone stuff like shots of the Toronto skyline. Why would you pay a day rate and deal with filming permits and all that stuff if you can just generate it in 20 seconds? I could continue, but I think you get it. Anything that doesn't require a human performance or show a real world historical moment, all of that is in danger, I think. It's a horrible thing to say, but after this quick test, I just don't see it going many other ways. In the long term, I think it will also be able to generate performances as well, but let's not go there quite yet. Okay, but what about peripheral technical jobs, like things that don't involve creating footage, but processing footage that's already been shot? I also think these jobs are in serious trouble, not just from Sora necessarily, but from other apps specializing in different things, like sound mixing. I can't see that being a human job for much longer outside the very high-end world. Color grading? also in trouble, I think. And that hurts me to say because as a DP, I know a lot of people who I like a lot who do this as a full-time job. But for sure, in a few years, you'll just be able to input log footage into a program, maybe even Resolve or Premiere, and say, grade this in the style of, and then insert whatever movie references. Again, the low budget market will be the first and hardest hit because big time directors and studios will want to have total control, and it's undeniable that top tier colorists really do make a big difference. But within a decade, I think the number of people earning a living coloring footage is going to be cut way back, which is a pretty tough pill to swallow. I'm not saying colorists are going to disappear, because when you see what a master can do and how much they can contribute to the style and look of a film, it's clear that there's levels to this stuff, and I'd never suggest that good colorists don't make a big difference. But outside the world of big productions, I'm really worried. I do hope I'm wrong here, but if something is cheaper, faster, and still decent looking, a big section of the market is going to want to use it before too long. The same thing goes for graphic design, VFX, and motion graphics. Now, I realize that these are scary predictions, and for the record, this isn't something I like or I'm hoping for, because it's pretty awful when you think of all the people who are going to be impacted. But I just don't see how it's going to go any other way except at the elite levels. And that creates a problem, because if there's no work at the bottom of the industry, how are new people supposed to get elite? Obviously, I don't have the answers here, but these are questions that we all need to start thinking about right now, because one final time, this is the worst this will ever be, and it's only been out for a month. So there's the doom and gloom stuff just straight up as I see it, because there's no point in beating around the bush anymore. But what does that mean for you, and how can you future-proof yourself in an AI-driven industry? Well, the answer is both pretty simple and extremely complicated at the same time. Let's start with the film jobs that are the most AI resistant, and hopefully this is good news for viewers of this channel, because at least as far as I can tell, documentaries are going to be pretty tough to replicate with AI. That's obviously because you can't generate coverage of something that really happened. I mean, sure, you could possibly get Sora to eventually spit out a clone of a presidential speech or NBA championship or something, but that's still based on it having a reference for what actually happened in the moment. And for that, you're going to need a crew there to capture it. That makes news and events coverage like weddings and sports a bit safer as well. Now, whether or not people actually want that and there's still a market for it, I can't say, but for now, real people have to shoot that stuff based on real events. I'm also not saying AI can't churn out documentary-alike content, but there's no way around the fact that it just isn't going to be real. And since the only reason people watch docs is to learn about the world or be inspired by what others have accomplished in their lives, there's just not much value in it if it's fake. Like if we look at, I don't know, Tiger King from a few years ago that everyone watched, if it came out that it was actually just generated by AI based on some pseudo-real events, I think viewer interest would disappear immediately. There's just no reason to watch a doc or news or sports or anything in that vein if it's not real, because what's the point? Just watch a movie instead. Now, sure, there are lots of jobs within the doc industry that are under threat, like the VFX and sound mixing and grading and all the other stuff we already talked about, but the actual ideation and capture of a real world story will have to be shot by and feature real people, for now anyways. And on a similar note, any job that requires physical presence at a location is also a bit safer, because AI and robotics are not advancing at the same speed, and we're still quite a ways away from a robot that can actually climb a mountain with a camera and frame a nice shot.
Robot, showing the humanoid number 001 standing up from a lying down position.
Same thing goes for the on-set sound recordist, the hair and makeup people, the set deck department, and really anything else that has to be done in real time and on location. At least for a while anyways, because yeah, I've seen the weird Boston Dynamics robots and whatever those creepy machine bartenders at the Tesla events were. But the tech just isn't there yet, and even when it's going to be cost prohibitive for a bit still. Now, is it possible that one day a robot cam op combined with an advanced creative algorithm could replace DPs? Sure, I could see it eventually. But watching this video in 2025, I don't think that's something we have to worry about anytime soon. I also think that the higher end movies and commercials are going to stay human-led for a long time still, because the very best storytellers, like think of Chris Nolan or Spike Jonze, those people are going to want to work with people who are incredibly talented and can help improve their film through collaboration. Yes, we're probably a lot closer to being able to access one-of-one custom stories that an AI will create specifically for you based on what you like, and we're probably a lot closer than anyone realizes, and that is going to decimate things like Hallmark movies movies and soap operas one day. But big, culturally loved films like Oppenheimer are going to be a little tougher. And not just because of the technical expertise and creative talent involved, but because humans are still mostly social creatures, and the reason movies like that do so well is because we watch them together and then we talk about them after. I mean, who knows what Gen Alpha is going to like when they grow up, and for all I know, they'll be totally cool just sitting in the basement, vaping, and not interacting with anybody. But for now, most people value shared experiences more than ones that they only see themselves. Like if you were the only one on Earth to see Oppenheimer, or let's say witness a solar eclipse, even though it's still pretty cool, it wouldn't be the same powerful feeling of awe if the other people you knew didn't share it with you and talk about it. Just like Chris McCandless realizes at the end of Into the Wild, true happiness is only real when shared. And apart from the sort of, wow, did you see that crazy thing AI just made type of conversation, I just don't see AI generating films scratching that same itch. That's my take anyways, but feel free to disagree with me in the comments, because what do I really know? So if I were getting into the film industry in 2025, or even if I'd already been around for a while, knowing what Sora and whatever other AI tools that are coming out we haven't even heard of yet are doing, what would I do? Is it even worth trying, or is film in general going the way of switchboard operators or customer service phone reps? Well, in my opinion, there are still lots of opportunities in the industry both now and in the future, but only if you position yourself the right way. And that means being a storyteller and not a technician. Like we already talked about, I just don't see any way the vast majority of technical jobs aren't in real trouble. So the assistant editors, the sound mixers, the VFX people, the colorists, it's a bit bleak. And yes, before people freak out, I know that these are creative jobs too, and that a good colorist or sound mixer isn't the same thing as a data entry technician. But when an AI algorithm can study every film ever made and how they're graded, and then precisely match a look based on what a director likes, that's going to put a ton of people out of work, and the lower the budget, the faster the jobs will disappear. Like if you have $200 million to make a movie, then yeah, hire a pro. But if you're making an indie film, wouldn't it make more sense to spend the extra cash on better actors or cooler locations or more shooting days? I kind of think a lot of people will think so. But the storytellers, like the writers, directors, cinematographers, and senior editors, those people are going to fare a little bit better. Yeah, AI can write a film script already, and it can even cut your footage for you if you want, but it doesn't really understand things like emotion, dramatic timing, and suspense. That's probably going to be true for a little while anyways. Plus, so many of the most interesting projects come together because of the collaboration between talented people, and that's going to be tough for AI to integrate into. How many times have you heard someone say in an interview, "This wasn't in the original script, my DP suggested it on the day," or "The editor came up with this really unusual way of stringing together shots that I never thought of"? I can't imagine that the best storytellers are going to get the same level of collaboration from an algorithm. That means if I were trying to make myself AI resistant, because I don't really think we can say anything is AI proof right now, I'd spend as much energy as possible building a network of collaborators, because the more tightly knit and collaborative your team, the less they're going to want to replace you with a computer. If you work by yourself and only ever interact with people via email, it's going to be a bit easier for them to ditch you because you just don't seem as real. It's the same reason that networking face-to-face is so much more effective than DMs or something, and why it's much easier to get hired back than hired for the first time. People like to work with people that they know, and as these trends progress, the more collaborative your process is, the safer you are, in my opinion. You're also going to want to find a way out of the low budget world as quickly as possible, which is obviously much easier said than done, and I don't want to make it seem like it's some straightforward thing. But like I said, the lower the budget, the more people will turn to AI to replace people. This creates a chicken and the egg scenario where there are less jobs at the bottom, meaning that it's harder to get the experience in the first place and eventually rise through the ranks and get to the big budget world. But how we fix that is kind of beyond the scope of this video, because I don't know. Maybe that means investing in more spec projects to catch the eye of higher end clients, or going full tilt into networking to find people operating at the next level. There really isn't a playbook on how to do this in X number of steps, unfortunately, but in my opinion, the closer to the bottom you are, the more danger you're in, and the harder you're going to have to fight to stay in this business. Is all this terrifying? Yeah, big time. As I say this, I recognize it's brutal and unfair and just overall a bad thing in my opinion. Do I want my friends who color mid-budget commercials or create beautiful pieces of claymation to be made obsolete? No, it's heartbreaking. But wanting something to be one way is very different from what all the signs are telling us. Just because you like color grading or sound mixing and you're even good at it doesn't mean that you get to keep doing it. The assembly line workers who got replaced by robots didn't want to lose their jobs any more than a motion graphics artist will, but that didn't stop the factories from doing it anyways. And no, I don't think motion graphics is the same thing as putting together a coffee maker, but within the context of this video, it's kind of the same idea. With all that said, these changes are also going to mean the creation of new jobs that don't even exist right now. And here mainly I'm talking about AI wranglers, though they'll probably be called AI managers or supervisors or something. Just like how the DP oversees the camera department and a post-production supervisor looks over the edit related stuff, there's going to be a need for people who can make these new AI tools work in the way the director or the client imagines. Just in my quick test with Sora, for example, there were all sorts of wonky things like crazy camera movement and strange physics, and even though I didn't try that hard to fix it, I could already tell that there was a bit of an art to getting it to generate videos in exactly the way you want. As this stuff gets more and more mainstream, that means that film crews are going to need people who really understand how to get the most out of the new tools and get specific, repeatable results. Now, whether or not you think that seems like a fun or creative job is up to you, but that does mean that if you're just getting started, or maybe you're looking to make a move mid-career to stay relevant, there are probably opportunities there. Personally, I'm not that worried about my job security, mainly because I deal with physically being in a location, interacting with subjects and real world events that can't be faked. And I think I'd end up smashing my keyboard if I'd had to spend all day prompting AI, but it is worth thinking about if you're wired for work like that. Because as an AI supervisor, you could actually end up having a pretty significant role on the filmmaking team because you'll be the main link between the senior creatives and the AI. AI isn't going to take over filmmaking in my opinion, but it will be highly integrated into the process and someone is going to have to oversee that, at least until we hit the singularity and it starts making decisions for itself, which doesn't sound as far-fetched to me as it once did. Kind of creepy. So long story short, big changes are coming, and I'm going to keep making these videos periodically as the technology changes because we all need to keep tabs on it and it's changing fast. But if you haven't played around with Sora, I'd strongly suggest giving it a try just to see what it can do, because it rattled me, if I'm being honest, and it made me realize that in under 10 minutes, a lot of film gigs are in trouble. Watching commentary about something is one thing, but actually seeing it work for yourself hits differently. But if you can position yourself as a collaborative storyteller or someone whose job requires them to physically be on location and interacting with other people, I think there's still a lot of opportunities out there. But what do you all think? What's coming and what does this mean for film in general? I'm personally not going anywhere and I'm doubling down on my career, and I think there's still a chance for tons of other people to find their way in the industry for a long time still. But if you disagree or if you have different ideas, I'd love to hear about them. One way or the other, we're living in interesting times. See ya.